My rich husband didn't throw me a birthday party. He threw me a trial. The moment I walked into the Grand Aurelia ballroom, his mother grabbed my wrist and dragged me toward a glass scale placed under a spotlight in the middle of the room. At first, I thought it had to be a joke, some cruel little Whitmore joke I was supposed to smile through because smiling was what I had been trained to do in that family. Then Adrian lifted a microphone, looked across the room full of guests and said, "Before she signs the divorce papers, let everyone see what I wasted 7 years feeding." The room laughed. Not everyone, but enough. Enough for the sound to spread across the chandeliers, the champagne glasses, the white roses, and the polished faces of people who pretended to be uncomfortable while leaning forward to watch. I tried to pull my hand back, but Evelyn Whitmore tightened her fingers around my wrist until her rings cut into my skin. "Don't act proud now," she said, loud enough for the front tables to hear. "You were a poor girl when we picked you up. Now you're just a fat mistake my son has to erase." Then she slapped me, in front of everyone. My head turned from the force of it, and for 1 second, the whole ballroom disappeared. I could not hear the laughter anymore. I could not hear the music. I could not hear the phones being lifted to record me. All I could hear was my own breathing, sharp and broken, as I stood in the black dress I had spent 2 hours trying to make look elegant on a body everyone in that family had taught me to hate. That morning, Adrian had stood in our bedroom wearing the expensive watch his father gave him and said, "Be ready by 7. I planned something for your birthday." For the first time in months, I let myself believe he still saw me as his wife. So I did my hair. I covered the dark circles under my eyes. I put on lipstick with shaking hands. I chose the only dress I owned that did not make me feel like I was spilling out of myself. I looked in the mirror and whispered, "Just get through tonight." I did not know he had spent weeks preparing the room where he planned to destroy me. Behind the scale, a giant screen lit up with 2 versions of my life. On one side were old photos of me from years ago, thin, smiling, young, standing beside Adrian when his family still pretended I was charming enough to tolerate. On the other side were pictures I had never seen before. Me eating alone in the kitchen at midnight. Me asleep on the couch, exhausted and open-mouthed. Me crying in an oversized shirt. Me standing in front of a mirror, holding fabric against my stomach, not knowing someone had taken a picture from the doorway. My stomach turned cold. Those were not photos a husband took by accident. Those were photos collected like evidence. On the cake table, there was no birthday message. No candles arranged with love. No flowers chosen for me. Just a white cake with red letters across the top. "Lose the weight, save the marriage." Evelyn stood beside it like a judge waiting for a confession. Richard Whitmore held a glass of champagne and looked bored, as if humiliating his daughter-in-law were just another family meeting. Camille, Adrian's sister, was already filming, smiling like she had been waiting all night for my face to break. Adrian walked closer, still holding the microphone. "Look at her," he said. "When I married her, she had nothing. No money, no status, no family name. We gave her everything. And this is what she became." A few people laughed again. Others looked away, not because they were going to stop him, but because they wanted the privilege of witnessing cruelty without the responsibility of interrupting it. I looked at Adrian, searching for the man who once told me I was the only person who made him feel human. But that man was gone. Or maybe he had never existed. Then the double doors opened, and my best friend walked in wearing a red dress. For one stupid, desperate second I felt relief. I thought Marissa had come to save me. I thought she would run to me, pull me away from the scale and say, "Enough. This is cruel." Instead, she walked straight to my husband. She slipped her hand around Adrian's arm like it belonged there. The room went quiet, but not because they were shocked. They already knew. I was the last person in that ballroom being told the truth. Marissa looked at me with the same soft face she used when she used to sit on my bed and listen to me cry about my body, my marriage, my fear that Adrian could barely look at me anymore. Then she said, "I told you to love your body because I knew no one else would." That hurt more than the slap, because she knew everything. She knew I cried after doctor appointments. She knew I avoided mirrors. She knew I stopped going to family dinners because Evelyn watched every bite I took. She knew I still kept my old jeans in a drawer, not because I thought I would fit into them again, but because I missed the version of myself people used to be kinder to. And she had used all of it. Richard stepped forward and threw a black folder at my feet. Divorce papers spilled across the polished floor and stopped beside my shoes. Adrian lowered the microphone and said, "Sign them. Don't make this uglier than it already is." Evelyn shoved me closer to the scale. "Step on it first," she said. "Let everyone see the truth before you leave this family." My hands trembled. My face burned. My chest felt so tight I thought I might collapse right there beneath the chandelier. With stolen photos of my body behind me and my husband's mistress standing beside him in red. And that was exactly what they wanted. They wanted me shaking. They wanted me crying. They wanted me humiliated badly enough to sign anything they put in front of me. They expected me to break. But what they did not know was that the hotel they were humiliating me in, the debt choking their family company, and the investor quietly buying their empire were all mine. So I bent down slowly. Adrian smiled because he thought I was reaching for the divorce papers. Evelyn smiled because she thought I was finally obeying. Marissa tilted her head with that fake pity she had practiced so well. But I did not pick up the papers. I picked up the microphone Adrian had dropped near my feet. The ballroom speakers hummed. Every camera turned toward me. I touched the corner of my mouth, saw blood on my fingertip, and smiled. Because if they wanted a trial, I was ready to present my evidence. Before that night in the ballroom, I used to believe Adrian Whitmore loved me because he saw something in me no one else did. I was not born into money. I grew up counting coins before buying groceries, learning which bills could be paid late, and pretending I was not hungry when there was not enough food for everyone. By 22, I was working 2 jobs just to keep a rented room above a laundromat. In the mornings, I stood behind the front desk of a small hotel, smiling at wealthy guests who spent more on one dinner than I spent on food in a week. At night, I sewed in the back of a tiny alteration shop, hemming silk gowns and fixing expensive suits for women who never had to ask what anything cost. That was where Adrian found me. He came into the hotel one rainy evening wearing a black coat, polished shoes, and the calm confidence of a man who had never had to choose between rent and dinner. Everyone knew the Whitmore name. His family owned hotels, restaurants, and real estate across the city. Managers straightened when he entered. Staff lowered their voices. I apologized for my wet hair because the bus had been late and I had run 3 blocks through the rain. Adrian only smiled and said, "You're the only honest thing I've seen in this place all day." At the time I thought that was kindness. Later, I would understand it was the first time he enjoyed sounding like a savior. He kept coming back. He brought me coffee. He remembered how I took it. He noticed when I looked tired and said, "A woman like you shouldn't have to work this hard." No one had ever said that to me before. I was young enough to mistake rescue for love. When he asked me out, I said no twice because I understood the distance between us. Men like Adrian did not marry women like me. They called us refreshing, humble, different, and then went home to women whose last names opened doors. But Adrian kept showing up. He said he was tired of women who cared about status. He said I made him feel grounded. I believed him because I wanted to believe poverty did not make me less worthy of being chosen. The first time he brought me to the Whitmore estate, I wore a second-hand blue dress I had altered myself until it almost looked expensive. I practiced how to hold my fork. I smoothed my hair until my scalp hurt. I told myself that if I was polite enough, careful enough, grateful enough, they would understand why Adrian loved me. His mother, Evelyn, opened the door and looked at me from my shoes to my earrings without smiling. "So this is her," she said, not to me but to Adrian. His father, Richard, shook my hand like he was greeting an employee. His sister, Camille, asked what my parents did before we had even sat down. When I said my mother cleaned offices and my father had left before I could remember his voice, the table went quiet in that polished, expensive way rich people use when they want you to feel small without saying anything directly. Adrian squeezed my hand under the table, and I thought it meant he was protecting me. But he did not correct Evelyn when she called me a hard-working little thing. He did not stop Richard from joking that I must find the dining room overwhelming. He only smiled and said, "She's different from the girls I usually bring home." Everyone laughed. I laughed too because I did not yet understand that different in that room did not mean special. It meant beneath them. Still, when Adrian proposed 6 months later, I said yes. I told myself love would be enough. On our wedding day, Evelyn kissed my cheek and whispered, "You are very lucky." Not congratulations. Not welcome to the family. Just lucky. And for years that word became the leash they wrapped around my throat. Lucky Adrian noticed me. Lucky I wore the Whitmore name. Lucky I no longer took the bus. Lucky I lived in a house with marble floors and staff. Lucky I had been lifted out of the life I came from. At first Adrian defended me in small ways, but even his defense sounded like ownership. She's learning, he would say. Give her time. As if I were a project. As if marriage to him were a finishing school for a poor woman who should have been grateful for the upgrade. By the time I realized he had not married me because he respected where I came from, but because he liked being the man who pulled me out of it, I was already trapped inside the life everyone kept telling me I was lucky to have. The first year of our marriage, I kept telling myself cruelty looked different in rich houses. It did not always shout. It did not always slam doors. Sometimes it smiled across a dinner table, corrected the way I held a glass, and called it refinement. Sometimes it reminded me how much everything cost until even breathing inside that mansion felt like accepting a loan I could never repay. The Whitmores never treated me like Adrian's wife. They treated me like his charity story. Evelyn asked if I had ever eaten certain foods before, as if poverty meant I had been raised outside civilization. Camille laughed when I mispronounced designer names. Richard introduced me to guests by saying Adrian had a generous heart, then looked at me just long enough for everyone to understand I was the proof. If I looked hurt, they called me sensitive. If I stayed quiet, they took it as permission. If I defended myself, they called me ungrateful. Adrian never stopped them in a way that mattered. In private, he would say, "You know how they are." Or, "They just want you to fit in." But fitting in meant cutting away pieces of myself until I became easier for them to display. I stopped wearing bright colors because Evelyn said they looked common. I stopped telling stories about my childhood because Camille said they sounded depressing. I stopped inviting old friends over because Adrian said his family wouldn't know how to talk to them. Then he asked me to quit my hotel job because a Whitmore wife shouldn't stand behind a front desk. He said I could still sew, but only as a hobby, never for money, because that would embarrass the family. He gave me a card attached to his account and called it freedom. But freedom does not come with statements reviewed by a family accountant. Freedom does not make your husband question a $20 lipstick while spending thousands on dinner with investors. Freedom does not make you feel guilty for wanting to send money to the mother who raised you. One night, when I told Adrian I wanted to help my mother with rent, he leaned back in his leather chair and said, "How long am I expected to support everyone you came from?" That was how he always said it. Where I came from, like my past, was dirt tracked across his clean floor. Over time, the house became his. The cars became his. The staff became his. The family name became his. And I became the woman allowed to use those things only as long as I remembered who had given them to me. During arguments, he would say, "You forget where I found you." When I said I wanted to work again, he laughed and asked if I planned to go back to hemming pants for tourists. That sentence stayed with me because it revealed the truth. Adrian had never respected my work. He only respected the version of me that made him feel powerful for rescuing me. He loved my struggle when it made him look noble. He hated it when it made me independent. So I became careful. Careful with my words, my clothes, my laughter, my mother's phone calls, my old stories, my opinions. I lived in a mansion and felt poorer than I had ever felt in that rented room above the laundromat, because back then, every dollar I earned belonged to me. In Adrian's world, every comfort came with the reminder that I had not earned it. Every gift had a chain. Every compliment carried a warning. And every time the Whitmores called me lucky, what they really meant was simple. Never forget that we can send you back to nothing. For a while, I convinced myself that if I worked hard enough at being the right kind of wife, the Whitmores would eventually stop seeing me as the poor girl Adrian had rescued and start seeing me as a woman who deserved her place beside him. I learned the names of Richard's investors, remembered which charities Evelyn used to polish the family image, memorized seating rules at formal dinners, and trained myself not to flinch when someone made a joke about my background. I did not sit in that mansion waiting to be cared for. I worked in ways no one wanted to count. I handled Adrian's calendar when his assistant quit. I reviewed guest lists for Evelyn because she said I had nothing better to do. I helped rewrite Adrian's speeches, sent gifts to clients' wives when he forgot their names, organized nurses and meals when Richard had surgery, and sat with Camille at 2 in the morning when her engagement fell apart. None of that appeared on a bank statement. None of it earned me respect. In that family, labor only counted when it produced profit, and love only counted when it made the Whitmore name look better. Still, I kept trying. I told myself marriage required sacrifice. I told myself I could survive being misunderstood as long as Adrian loved me in private. But private love slowly became private criticism. He began correcting me before his mother could. He told me which dresses looked cheap, which friends were too loud, which opinions I should keep to myself at dinner. If I pushed back, he sighed like I was a child refusing etiquette lessons. "I'm trying to help you," he would say. "You don't understand how people judge in our world." Our world. He said it like I had been invited into it but never helped build it. So I tried harder. I changed my hair. I lowered my voice. I stopped mentioning my mother's cleaning jobs because Evelyn's friends reacted with pity too sharp to be called kindness. I stopped sewing for myself because Adrian said homemade clothes looked desperate. Every part of me that had once helped me survive became something I was expected to hide. And hiding yourself is exhausting in a way people do not understand until it begins to change your body. I stopped sleeping. I woke at 3 in the morning with my heart racing, remembering some mistake I had made at dinner, or some look Evelyn had given me across the table. I skipped breakfast before events because I was afraid of being watched while eating, then came home starving and ashamed. I cried in bathrooms with marble floors that cost more than the apartment I grew up in. My body began to change slowly at first, then all at once. My face softened. My waist disappeared. Dresses that once zipped easily began stopping halfway up my back. I blamed myself before anyone else had the chance to. I bought shapewear that dug into my skin until I could barely breathe. I stood in front of mirrors pulling fabric away from my stomach, trying to find an angle where I still looked like a woman Adrian would be proud to stand beside. At first, he pretended not to notice. Then he noticed too much. He paused when I reached for bread. He asked whether I was really hungry. He suggested walks after dinner, but his eyes were not worried. They were disappointed. Evelyn was worse because she wanted everyone to hear. "Careful, dear," she said once as I spooned dressing onto my salad. "Comfort eating is a poor woman's habit. We try not to bring those habits into this family." The table went quiet. Adrian stared into his wineglass. Camille smiled. I put the spoon down and pretended I had lost my appetite. Later that night, Adrian told me his mother had been rude, but then he added, "You know she only says something when there's a problem." That was when I understood he agreed with her. He only disliked the way she said it. After that, my body became family property, something they discussed like a failing investment. Evelyn suggested nutritionists. Camille sent links to luxury fitness retreats with laughing emojis. Richard once told Adrian, not quietly enough, "You need to manage that before the press starts using old wedding photos." Manage that. Not me. That. Adrian stopped inviting me to business dinners. First he said I looked tired. Then he said the events were boring. Then he stopped making excuses altogether. I would find photos online the next day of him standing beside sleek women in silk dresses while I sat at home in clothes chosen not for beauty but for how much of me they could hide. When I asked why he did not want me there, he said, "I need people focused on business, not on what happened to you." What happened to me? As if my body were a scandal. As if I had betrayed him by becoming visible in a way he did not approve of. I began avoiding mirrors because they no longer reflected only me. They reflected every voice that had taught me to hate what I saw. I stopped going down to breakfast if I knew Evelyn was there. I stopped eating at family dinners except for tiny portions I could barely taste. Then, alone at night, I would stand in the kitchen and eat whatever did not require cooking, not because I was greedy, but because shame makes hunger feel secretive and desperate. The more they watched me, the more I hid. The more I hid, the more I hated myself. And through all of it, Marissa became the person I ran to. She had known me before Adrian, before the mansion, before the dresses I was afraid to stain. She came over when Adrian was away, sat on my bed, and let me say the ugly things out loud. I told her I missed feeling pretty. I told her I was scared Adrian could barely look at me. I told her I felt like my body had become a room everyone was allowed to enter and insult. She held my hand and said, "You are still you. Don't let them make you disappear." I believed her because I needed one person in that world who did not look at me like a mistake. I did not know then that every confession I gave her was becoming a weapon. Marissa had been my best friend long before Adrian Whitmore ever learned my name, and that was what made her dangerous. She did not have to guess where I was weak. I handed her the map myself. We met years before I married into the Whitmore family, back when I was still working at the hotel by day and sewing at night, back when both of us were broke enough to split one takeout meal and call it dinner. Marissa was beautiful in a sharp, hungry way, the kind of woman who could walk into a room wearing cheap lipstick and somehow make people believe it was designer. She used to say we were the same because we both wanted more than the lives we had been given. I believed her. When I met Adrian, she was the first person I told. She screamed into the phone like I had won the lottery, then came over with drugstore champagne and sat on my bed while I described his smile, his coat, the way he looked at me like I was not invisible. "This is it," she said, grabbing my hands. "This is your way out." I should have noticed that she said way out, not love. But back then I thought she meant happiness. When Adrian proposed, Marissa helped me alter my wedding dress because the boutique his mother chose made me feel like a girl wearing someone else's dream. She knelt on the floor with pins between her lips, smoothing the fabric over my waist, telling me I looked like proof that poor girls could still get fairy tales. She stood beside me on my wedding day, crying harder than anyone, holding my veil while Evelyn Whitmore watched us like we were both temporary mistakes. For years after that, Marissa remained the person I trusted to remember who I had been before the Whitmores started editing me. When Evelyn humiliated me at dinner, I called Marissa. When Adrian made a joke that cut too deep, I called Marissa. When Camille cropped half of my body out of a family photo, I sent it to Marissa and waited for her to tell me I was not imagining the cruelty. She always did. "They're jealous because you have something real," she would say. "Women like Evelyn can't stand anyone they can't control." When my weight changed and the house became a place where every mirror felt like an enemy, Marissa became my refuge. She came over with soft leggings, oversized sweaters, herbal tea, and the kind of concern that made me feel guilty for doubting her. She sat on my bed while I stood in front of the closet holding dresses that no longer fit, trying not to cry. "Your body is surviving," she told me once. "Stop apologizing for it." I wrote that sentence in my journal because I thought it was kindness. I did not know she would later repeat it to Adrian while laughing, telling him I was desperate enough to believe anything if it sounded like comfort. Slowly, Marissa became the keeper of all my private shame. I told her when Adrian stopped touching me. I told her when he turned his face away while I changed clothes. I told her when Evelyn left a weight loss clinic brochure on my vanity. I told her when I ate standing in the dark because sitting at the table made me feel watched. She listened with tears in her eyes, squeezed my hand and said, "You are still beautiful, Claire. Don't let them make you hate yourself." But sometimes when she thought I was not looking, I caught something else in her face. Not pity, hunger. Her eyes lingered too long on my bedroom, the silk curtains, the marble fireplace, the walk-in closet full of clothes I hated wearing. She began asking more questions about Adrian. Was he still coming home late? Was he still angry with his father? Did he ever talk about divorce? Did Richard control the family accounts? Or did Adrian still have access? I answered because I thought she was trying to understand my life. I did not realize she was studying the doorways into it. The first time I saw her and Adrian speak without me, I told myself not to be paranoid. It was at one of Evelyn's charity dinners. I had escaped to the upstairs bathroom because my shapewear had cut a raw line into my skin, and I needed 1 minute where no one could watch me breathe. When I came back down, I found Marissa near the terrace doors, laughing at something Adrian had said. His hand was on the small of her back. Not long enough to accuse, just long enough to make my stomach tighten. When they saw me, Marissa waved too quickly, and Adrian removed his hand like he had touched something hot. "We were just talking about you," she said. I wanted to ask why that made me feel worse. Instead, I smiled and stood beside them while my husband looked at my best friend with an ease he had not shown me in months. After that, Marissa began appearing at the house even when I had not invited her. Evelyn tolerated her in a way she had never tolerated my old friends. Camille complimented her dresses. Richard called her charming. Adrian started asking whether Marissa was coming to events because, as he put it, she helps you relax. In front of me, Marissa was loyal. In front of them, she was polished. She knew when to laugh at Adrian's jokes, when to flatter Evelyn, when to act like money had never impressed her while studying every inch of it. She did not make the mistakes I made. She adapted faster. She became the version of poor that rich people found entertaining instead of inconvenient. And because I still believed she loved me, I kept giving her pieces of myself. My fears, my shame, my loneliness, my body hatred, my marriage secrets, never understanding that one day she would hand every piece of it to my husband and call it strategy. The first time I understood that Marissa was not just watching my marriage fall apart but helping Adrian break it, I was standing outside his study with a basket of clean shirts in my arms. It was close to midnight, and the mansion was quiet in that cold, expensive way it always became after the staff left and the Whitmores disappeared behind polished doors. Adrian had snapped at me earlier because he could not find his blue cufflinks. I found them later in the pocket of a jacket he had thrown over a chair. And because some broken part of me was still trained to serve peace before pride, I decided to leave them on his desk. The study door was not fully closed. A strip of warm light cut across the hallway floor. I heard Adrian first. "She's getting worse," he said. "Every time I look at her, I remember what she used to be." I stopped moving. Then I heard Marissa laugh softly. "Then stop looking at what she used to be," she said. "Use what she is now." My fingers tightened around the basket handle. Adrian sighed. "If I leave her now, people will say I abandoned a poor fat wife. They'll turn her into a victim." Marissa answered like she had been waiting for the question. "Then don't leave her. Make her make it easy for you. Make her break down first. Publicly. Put her in a room with your family, your friends, people who matter. Show them what she's become. She'll panic. She'll cry. She might scream. Then when you file, everyone will say you were patient for too long." The hallway seemed to tilt beneath me. I should have opened the door. I should have screamed. I should have thrown the cufflinks at his face and asked how long my pain had been a plan to him. But I could not move. Adrian was quiet for a moment, then he asked, "And you?" Marissa's voice turned softer, almost pleased. "I'll be there after. I can be the woman who tried to help both of you. No one suspects the supportive best friend." A glass clinked. A chair shifted. Then Adrian asked, "You really think this will work?" Marissa said, "Adrian, she gave me everything. Every fear. Every insecurity. Every pathetic little sentence she whispers when she thinks she's safe. I know exactly how to make her fall apart." Something inside me went still. Not healed. Not strong. Still. For years I had imagined betrayal as something loud, lipstick on a collar, a hotel receipt, a message flashing on a phone. I had never imagined it would sound like my best friend using my tears as strategy. Then Adrian said, "She was poor when I found her. Now she's fat, broken, and easy to erase." Marissa replied, "Then erase her properly." I do not know how long I stood there after that. Long enough for my arms to ache. Long enough for the light under the door to blur. Long enough to understand that the marriage I had been begging to save had already been turned into a case file against me. When one of the cufflinks slipped from my hand and hit the hardwood floor, the voices inside stopped. I grabbed it before they could open the door and walked away without making another sound. Upstairs, I locked myself in the bathroom and waited for the collapse to come. It did not. No tears came. I looked at myself in the mirror. Tired face, swollen eyes, body wrapped in a robe I hated because it hid me and exposed me at the same time, and all I could hear was Marissa saying, "She gave me everything." And I understood that I had. I had given them my shame, my silence, my softness, my need to be loved. I had given them weapons because I still believed someone in that house would choose mercy. That night, Mercy died. I took my old phone from the drawer under the sink, the one Adrian thought I had thrown away after he bought me a newer model tied to his family plan. I charged it beside the bathtub and began writing down every word I had heard. Every sentence. Every name. Every detail. Then I opened the folder where I had saved Evelyn's messages, Camille's cruel posts, Adrian's receipts, and the little insults I had once collected because Marissa told me I might need proof. For the first time, I did not look at those files like a wounded woman trying to prove she had been hurt. I looked at them like evidence. By sunrise, I had changed my passwords, backed up everything in 3 places, opened a private email account, and scheduled an appointment with a divorce lawyer across town. I had no empire then. No secret company. No power anyone in that family respected. But I had one thing they had underestimated completely. I knew how to survive being poor. I knew how to work while exhausted. I knew how to start with nothing because nothing was where I had come from. Adrian thought poverty had made me grateful. He was wrong. Poverty had made me dangerous when cornered. And as I sat on the bathroom floor, heavier than the woman they married and poorer than the woman I would become, I finally understood that night did not make me strong. It made me done. And done, I would later learn, is sometimes much more dangerous than strong. After that night outside Adrian's study, I did not confront him. I did not confront Marissa. I did not scream, pack a bag, or throw the evidence in their faces the way a broken woman in a movie might do. I had been poor too long to waste the only advantage I had. Surprise. So I became quiet in a new way. Not the old quiet, the obedient quiet, the quiet of a woman trying not to make dinner uncomfortable. This was a watching quiet. A recording quiet. A dangerous quiet. I let Adrian think I was still too ashamed to notice him pulling away. I let Evelyn think her comments still made me shrink. I let Marissa sit beside me with that soft face and ask if I was sleeping better, as if she had not stood in my husband's study and explained exactly how to break me in public. The more I watched, the clearer it became that Marissa did not only want Adrian. She wanted my place. She wanted the house that had made me feel like a prisoner. She wanted the family name that had been used to choke me. She wanted the charity dinners, the polished introductions, the photographs beside Adrian, the cold approval of people who respected money more than decency. She had watched me suffer inside that world for years, and somehow her conclusion was not that I deserved freedom. Her conclusion was that she could wear the cage better. The first proof came from the security logs. The Whitmore house had cameras everywhere, not for safety, but because rich people loved control and called it protection. Adrian had always told me the system was too complicated, and I had let myself believe him. It was not. The staff tablet kept a visitor history. Marissa had been entering the house on days I was not home. Sometimes she came when Adrian said he had meetings. Sometimes she came when Evelyn hosted private lunches. Once, she arrived less than 10 minutes after I left for a doctor's appointment and stayed for 4 hours. 4 hours in my house with my husband while I sat in a clinic telling a stranger I could not sleep, could not stop gaining weight, could not understand why my own body felt like it had turned against me. That night, I searched Adrian's jacket pockets before sending them to the dry cleaner and found a receipt from a boutique I had never visited. A red dress. Marissa's size. Not mine. Not Evelyn's. Marissa's. I photographed it and added it to the folder marked Marissa. 2 days later, I found Adrian's old tablet in the gym and saw a message from her. "Your mother is warming up to me. She said I understand the family image better than Claire ever did." Adrian had replied. "She should have been the one I brought home." Marissa answered. "Then fix it." I read those words sitting on a weight bench Adrian had once bought after telling me we should get healthy together, though he had never meant together. I thought I had already reached the bottom of betrayal. I had not. The next message was a photo of me asleep on the couch, feverish, one hand resting on my stomach, my shirt pulled awkwardly across my body. I remembered that day. Marissa had brought soup. She had tucked a blanket around me and told me to rest. Then she had taken a picture and sent it to my husband with the message, "This is what you go home to. I don't know how you do it." Adrian replied, "Not for much longer." That was when every memory of her kindness began to rot. Every hug, every compliment, every time she told me I was still beautiful. Had she gone home and laughed with him afterward? Had she been studying my pain the whole time, waiting for the right way to sell it back to my husband as proof I deserved to disappear? I found the answer 3 nights later outside Evelyn's private dinner. I was not invited, officially because it was business-focused, which had become Adrian's polite way of saying he did not want my body in the room. But I came downstairs anyway, barefoot, quiet, dressed in a plain black dress, and stood in the hallway outside the dining room. Evelyn said, "Marissa presents herself well. That matters." Camille replied, "She actually looks like she belongs next to Adrian." Richard made a low approving sound. Then Adrian said, "Claire won't be a problem for much longer." Marissa's voice floated through the doorway, smooth and sweet. "I don't want to hurt her." No one spoke for a second. Then they laughed. Even Marissa laughed. She added, "But she has to understand that some women are built for this life, and some women are just rescued into it." I stood there with my nails cutting into my palms and finally understood the shape of her hunger. She did not see herself as a thief. She saw herself as the rightful replacement, the woman who could stand beside Adrian without embarrassing him, the woman Evelyn could display without apology, the woman who could take the Whitmore name and polish it while I disappeared back into whatever poor, fat, voiceless place they thought women like me came from. I went back upstairs before they saw me and opened the evidence folder again. Then I created a new one. I named it Replacement. Inside, I placed every receipt, every visitor log, every message, every stolen photo, every sentence proving that Marissa had not simply betrayed me for love. She had betrayed me for access. For years, she had mistaken my softness for stupidity, my shame for surrender, my body for weakness, and my poverty for permanent defeat. But sitting there in the dark, listening to their laughter echo faintly from downstairs, I realized something she had not. She wanted my place in the Whitmore world. I no longer did. I did not want Adrian's arm. I did not want Evelyn's approval. I did not want Richard's respect or Camille's fake acceptance. I wanted out. And once I got out, I wanted to make sure the world Marissa had betrayed me to enter collapsed before she could enjoy living in it. The moment that truly changed me did not happen outside Adrian's study, or in the hallway where I heard Marissa laugh with the family that wanted to replace me. Those moments taught me the truth. But the moment that made me move happened 3 weeks later in a boutique on Madison Avenue. Under lights so bright they made every inch of my body feel like it had been placed on display for punishment. Evelyn had insisted I come with her, Camille, and Marissa to choose a dress for the Whitmore Foundation Gala. I did not want to go. By then, I had already met with a divorce lawyer twice, copied financial records in secret, and learned that leaving Adrian would not be as simple as walking out of the mansion with a suitcase. The prenup was brutal. Most of the accounts were controlled by Adrian. The car I drove was leased through one of his companies. Even my phone was paid for by the Whitmore family plan. My lawyer had said it clearly. You need proof and you need independent income. So I went to the boutique because refusing would make Evelyn suspicious. The saleswoman brought out racks of silk and satin in sizes she knew would not fit me because Evelyn had called ahead and asked for aspirational options. Aspirational. That was rich women's language for humiliation with a bow on top. Camille picked up a silver gown, held it against her thin body, then smiled at me. Maybe they have curtains in the back. Marissa laughed too quickly, then touched my arm as if she felt sorry for me. Evelyn selected a pale gold dress from the rack and pushed it into my hands. I looked at the tag and knew immediately it would not go past my hips. It won't fit, I said quietly. Evelyn's eyes sharpened. Then let that motivate you. In the fitting room, I tried to pull the dress over my body, but the silk caught at my waist. The zipper would not move. The fabric tightened across my skin until I could barely breathe. I stood there sweating under the boutique lights, trapped halfway inside a dress chosen not to clothe me, but to prove I was too much for the room. Then Evelyn knocked once and opened the curtain before I could answer. Marissa, Camille, and 2 saleswomen were standing behind her. For one terrible second, everyone stared. The dress was twisted around me. My arms were pinned awkwardly. My face burned. Evelyn sighed like a disappointed owner returning damaged merchandise. This is exactly what I mean, she said. Adrian cannot bring this to a gala. This. Not Claire. Not his wife. This. Camille lifted her phone, pretending to check a message, but I saw the camera pointed toward the mirror. Marissa stepped forward and said softly, "Maybe we should give her a minute." It sounded protective, but her eyes flicked to Camille's phone, and I knew she wanted the picture too. Evelyn reached for the zipper and yanked it upward, hard enough that the fabric cut into my side. I gasped. "Hold still," she snapped. "If you had any discipline, this would not be painful." Then something tore. Just a small rip at the seam, but everyone heard it. Camille laughed under her breath. The saleswoman went pale. Evelyn let go of the zipper and looked at me with disgust so open she no longer bothered to disguise it as concern. "Do you know what embarrasses me most?" she asked. "It is not that you came from nothing. We could have polished that. It is that you were given everything and still let yourself become something no one can present." I looked past her into the mirror and saw all of them behind me. Evelyn with her perfect posture, Camille with her phone, Marissa with her fake pity, the saleswomen pretending the rich woman's cruelty was none of their business. Then I saw myself. Big. Humiliated. Half-dressed in a gown designed for a body I did not have. But for the first time I did not think I looked disgusting. I thought I looked trapped inside a world that had never intended to make room for me. That was different. And that difference mattered. Evelyn turned away and told the saleswoman, "Bring something black. Something that hides the problem." The problem? I stared at myself in the mirror while the torn seam scratched my skin. And suddenly I remembered the alteration shop where I used to work at night. I remembered women coming in ashamed because boutiques treated their bodies like inconvenience. I remembered reshaping fabric so someone could breathe at a wedding, sit at a dinner, dance without holding her stomach, walk into a room without apologizing for taking up space. I remembered the look on their faces when a dress finally fit, not because they had become smaller, but because someone had built the dress for the body they actually had. Standing there in that fitting room, with Evelyn calling me unpresentable and Marissa watching me like a future she planned to erase, I saw something none of them saw. I saw a market. I saw millions of women being punished by clothes that were never made for them, mirrors that had been turned into weapons, and people repeating the same lie. Become smaller before you are allowed to feel beautiful. My shame cracked open, and underneath it was not confidence yet. It was rage with a purpose. I changed back into my own black dress, folded the torn gold gown, and handed it to the saleswoman. Evelyn said, "We'll pay for the damage." I looked at her and said, "No, I will." Everyone paused because I had never spoken to her in that tone before. I took out the small debit card Adrian did not know about, the one connected to the private account where I had hidden tiny amounts of money for years without knowing exactly why. Paying for that dress took almost everything I had left. But as the receipt printed, I felt strangely calm. Evelyn thought she had made me pay for being too big. She did not know she had just paid for my first piece of market research. That night, Adrian came home late and saw me sketching dress shapes on the back of an old envelope. "What is this?" he asked. "Clothes," I said. "For women who look like me." He laughed. "Claire, selling clothes for fat women won't make you rich." I took the sketch back before he could crumple it. "Maybe not," I said. He kissed my forehead like men kiss women they no longer respect and walked away. After he closed the bathroom door, I opened my laptop and typed the first name that came into my head. More woman. Not less. Not hidden. Not corrected. More. More fabric. More room. More dignity. More anger. More life. By sunrise, I had a notebook full of designs, a list of suppliers from my old sewing days, 3 women from online support groups willing to let me measure them properly, and one clear thought burning through me. If their world had no place for women like me, I would build one bigger than theirs. The first version of More Woman did not look like revenge. It looked like me sitting alone after midnight with a measuring tape, a cracked laptop, 3 yards of black stretch fabric, and a body everyone in that house had taught me to apologize for. Adrian was upstairs sleeping in the guest room he had started using without explanation. Marissa was probably somewhere answering his messages while pretending to worry about me, and the Whitmore mansion was silent except for the sound of my scissors cutting through fabric. I had no investors, no staff, no warehouse, no polished office with glass walls and expensive coffee. I had an old sewing machine hidden in the storage room behind boxes of Evelyn's seasonal decorations, a private bank account with almost nothing left in it after paying for the torn boutique dress, and a name written at the top of a notebook like a dare, More Woman. I started with what I knew. Not fashion the way rich people use the word, not runway clothes made for women who could stand still and be admired, but clothes for women who had to live inside their bodies all day while the world punished them for being visible. I designed dresses with waistbands that did not roll down when someone sat, sleeves that gave room without looking apologetic, wrap shapes that adjusted with the body instead of demanding the body obey the dress. I thought about every fitting room where I had wanted to vanish, every dinner where I had tugged fabric over my stomach, every gala where Adrian's eyes swept over me and found failure before finding his wife. Then I built clothes for the woman I had needed someone to build for me. At first, I used myself as the model because I had no one else. I took measurements in the bathroom mirror with hands that shook, not from shame this time, but from the strange intimacy of looking at my body like a design problem instead of a personal crime. Bust, waist, hip, upper arm, thigh, shoulder width, the places where seams betrayed, the places where fabric pulled, the places where cheap brands added inches without adding thought. I wrote everything down. Then I joined online groups under a fake name and started listening to women who sounded exactly like me. Women who said doctors dismissed them, husbands hid them, mothers criticized them, stores treated their bodies like mistakes to be covered instead of people to be dressed. One night, I posted a quiet message asking if anyone would test samples for a small custom clothing idea made for plus-size women who were tired of apologizing before giving their measurements. I expected silence. By morning, there were 38 messages. By the end of the week, there were more than 100. Women sent me their measurements with apologies attached, as if numbers were confessions. Sorry, my arms are huge. Sorry, my stomach is weird after surgery. Sorry, I know this is a difficult size. Every apology felt like a match dropped into gasoline. I wrote back to each one, "Your body is not difficult. The clothes were lazy." That sentence became the first thing anyone loved about more women before they ever saw a dress. During the day, I remained the quiet wife Adrian expected. Tired, ashamed, too worn down to be dangerous. I let Evelyn think her comments had made me smaller. I let Camille think her pictures had broken me. I let Marissa ask why I looked so exhausted, while my real exhaustion came from building a company after everyone else went to sleep. At night, I slipped into the storage room, pulled the sewing machine onto a folding table, and worked until my back ached and my eyes burned. I cut fabric on the floor because I had no proper table. I hid invoices inside a cookbook Evelyn would never open. I stored finished dresses behind old Christmas wreaths. I shipped the first 5 orders from a post office 2 towns away because I was afraid someone from the Whitmore staff would see the packages. The first customer was a woman named Dana from Ohio. She ordered a black wrap dress and sent me 3 messages apologizing for her measurements before I had even started sewing. I made her dress slowly, carefully, measuring every seam twice because I knew it was not only fabric. It was proof. When she received it, I did not hear from her for 2 days. I thought I had failed. Then she posted a photo of herself standing in her bedroom, one hand on her hip, crying and smiling at the same time. Her caption said, "For the first time in 10 years, I didn't feel like the dress was asking me to become someone else." I read it in the laundry room with a basket of Adrian's shirts at my feet and pressed my hand over my mouth so I would not make a sound. That review brought 20 orders. 20 became 70. 70 became 200. I was not ready. I made mistakes. I cut pieces wrong. I cried when a supplier raised prices. I refunded orders I could not finish fast enough. I learned shipping software at 3 in the morning and watched videos about small business taxes while Adrian slept in silk sheets bought by a family that thought I had no ambition left. Once, he walked into the kitchen at 2:30 and found me sketching sleeve variations on a napkin. "Still playing with your fat clothes?" he asked. I closed the notebook before he could see the order numbers. "Couldn't sleep," I said. He laughed and opened the refrigerator. "Maybe if you put that energy into losing weight, we'd both be happier." I looked at his reflection in the dark window and said nothing. That became my strongest skill. Letting cruel people believe silence meant they had won. The more women grew, the more I understood I was not just selling fabric. I was selling a woman the chance to attend a wedding without planning an escape route to the bathroom. I was selling her the right to sit at dinner without pulling a cardigan across her lap. I was selling her the right to look expensive, sensual, professional, soft, powerful, or dangerous without first asking permission from a smaller body. I refused to use words like slimming, hiding, flattering problem areas, or disguising the body. I wrote product descriptions that said, "Made for the body you have today," and "No apology built into the seams," and "You do not need to be smaller to enter the room." Women shared the lines. Influencers found the brand. A stylist ordered 3 dresses for a client and came back for 20 more. A boutique owner in Chicago emailed about wholesale. I almost deleted the message because I thought it was fake. It was not. The first time more women made more in a week than I used to make in a month at the hotel, I sat on the storage room floor and laughed until I cried. The first time it made more in a month than Adrian gave me for personal spending, I transferred half into an account he could never touch and used the rest to hire a contract seamstress under strict confidentiality. I was still afraid every day. Afraid Adrian would find the invoices. Afraid Evelyn would ask why I was receiving fabric deliveries. Afraid Marissa would notice I was no longer telling her everything. But under the fear, something new was growing. Not confidence yet. Not peace. Power. Quiet power. The kind that starts in the dark, stitch by stitch, order by order, until one day the people who called you worthless realize you were building something they could not control. At the Whitmore table, I still sat quietly while Richard talked about business, while Adrian ignored me, while Evelyn judged every bite I took. They saw a fat wife becoming easier to erase. They did not see the company forming under their roof. They did not see the customers writing my name like a thank you note. They did not see More Woman becoming more than a brand. But I did. And for the first time in years, when I looked in the mirror, I did not ask how to become smaller. I asked how far I could grow. Then More Woman stopped growing like a secret and started growing like a fire. A boutique chain sold out our first test run in 6 days. A plus-size actress wore one of our black structured gowns to a premiere, tagged the brand, and crashed the website before midnight. Orders came from women who had spent their whole lives being told they needed to shrink before they deserved elegance. They wanted workwear that did not punish them for sitting, evening wear that did not treat their arms like a mistake, bridal gowns that did not make them feel like an exception someone had reluctantly accommodated. I could no longer cut fabric on the storage room floor and pretend this was a hobby. I hired a contract seamstress first, then 2 more, all under strict confidentiality. Then I hired Nina, a production manager who had spent years watching fashion companies treat plus-size women like leftovers. The first time she saw my patterns, she ran her fingers over the seams and said, "Whoever made these has been hurt by clothes." I told her that was exactly why they worked. We moved from the mansion storage room to a small studio across town, then to a proper workspace with cutting tables, industrial machines, shelves of fabric, and racks labeled by body shape instead of just size. Still, I kept my face out of everything. Publicly, More Woman was founded by a private designer who believed plus-size women deserved luxury without apology. Nina became the public operations lead. Vivian, a sharp consultant with perfect suits and no patience for weak branding, handled press. I signed internal documents as C. More and let people assume whatever they wanted. Adrian still thought I was a tired, ashamed wife wasting time with sketches. Evelyn still thought I had become too embarrassed to fight. Marissa still thought she knew every important secret in my life. None of them knew that the company being praised online, requested by boutiques, and whispered about by stylists was mine. With every order, every partnership, every wire transfer into accounts Adrian could not monitor, I felt the rope around my throat loosen. But money alone was not enough. My lawyer Elise was the first person who looked at my business, my marriage, and my evidence folder and said, "You are not trapped. You are building leverage." That word changed everything. Leverage. Not hope. Not revenge. Leverage. She introduced me to Paul, a forensic accountant who reviewed the family statements I had copied from Adrian's office, the reports Richard left carelessly in the library, and the accounts Adrian thought I was too dependent to understand. Paul found what I had only suspected. The Whitmore empire looked beautiful from the street and rotten behind the doors. Their hotels were buried in debt. Their restaurant division had been losing money for months. Richard's favorite redevelopment project was stalled because he had borrowed against properties already carrying too much weight. The family was not rich the way poor people imagine rich people are rich. They were rich on paper, rich in reputation, rich in borrowed confidence. Underneath it all, they were drowning quietly. Paul placed the first report in front of me and said, "They still have power, but they are vulnerable in ways they do not want anyone to know." For a moment, I remembered Adrian laughing in the kitchen, telling me selling clothes for fat women would never make me rich. Then I looked at More Woman's latest valuation on another page and felt something colder than happiness move through me. Calm. The kind of calm that comes when the person holding a knife does not realize you have been building a wall behind them. With Elise's help, I created a holding company so plain and forgettable that no one in the Whitmore house would ever notice it. Meridian Vale Holdings. Through that company, we began buying the debt choking their family business. Quietly, legally, patiently. A hotel loan came first, then a restaurant loan, then a dangerous piece of the redevelopment debt Richard still bragged about at dinner, as if it were fully under control. I would sit at the Whitmore table while Richard talked about temporary pressure, while Adrian checked messages from Marissa under the table, while Evelyn criticized the food, and no one knew that somewhere in a law office across town, my signature was moving closer to the throat of their empire. More women kept expanding. Workwear, evening wear, bridal. Women posted photos in gowns that did not require starving, squeezing, apologizing, or pretending. One caption went viral. I did not lose weight for the dress. The dress finally respected me. Orders tripled again. Department stores called. Investors offered money. I accepted only the ones who understood discretion. Every dollar I earned became more than income. It became distance, protection, ammunition. At home I stayed useful and underestimated. I let Adrian see old sweaters and tired eyes. I let Evelyn believe her comments still landed. I let Marissa think her access to my pain was still current. When she asked if I had thought more about protecting myself in the divorce, I said I did not know if I had the strength. She squeezed my hand and said, "You're stronger than you think." I nearly smiled at the performance. By then I had already seen the messages about my birthday. I had seen the guest list. I had seen the cake invoice. I had even seen Adrian's note to Camille. Make sure someone records everything when she loses it. They were building a stage for my collapse. I was building the documents for theirs. 2 weeks before my birthday, Paul called me into his office and placed a thick file on the table. "It's done," he said. Meridian Vale controls the most dangerous portion of Whitmore Hospitality's debt. If they default, you can force asset sales, management changes, or restructuring. If they humiliate you publicly and damage their own reputation, their lenders will panic. I touched the file with the tips of my fingers. It was heavier than fabric, heavier than divorce papers, heavier than every insult they had thrown at me, because this was the first thing in years that felt heavier than my shame. That night, I returned to the mansion and found Adrian in the hallway, smelling faintly of Marissa's perfume. He looked me up and down and said, "You should start thinking about your birthday. My family is planning something special." His smile was smooth, rehearsed, cruel in a way he thought I was still too broken to recognize. I smiled back. "I'll be there," I said. He touched my cheek with false tenderness and walked away. I stood there until his footsteps disappeared, then opened the hidden phone in my pocket and read the latest message from Nina. More women had just crossed 8 figures in annual revenue. Downstairs, the Whitmores were setting the table like they still owned the world. Upstairs, Marissa was texting my husband about the red dress she planned to wear after I was erased. And in my hand, glowing quietly against my palm, was proof that the poor, fat wife they pitted had become richer than the family that taught her to feel worthless. They just did not know it yet. The invitation to my own humiliation arrived in my email 3 days later, wrapped in gold script and fake elegance. "A birthday celebration for Claire Whitmore," it said, as if my name had not become something Adrian spat out when he was angry and Evelyn avoided saying unless there were guests nearby. The venue was the Grand Aurelia Ballroom, the largest event room inside the Whitmore Royal Hotel, the crown jewel of his family's hospitality empire, and the place Evelyn liked to call the room where real families make history. I stared at the invitation for a long time, not because I was surprised, but because of how carefully they had disguised cruelty as celebration. Cream background, gold border, champagne reception, formal attire. 7 o'clock. No mention of the scale. No mention of the cake. No mention of the divorce papers Adrian had already printed and placed in a black leather folder in his study. But I knew. By then I knew almost everything. Adrian thought he was planning the night behind my back, but he had grown lazy in his arrogance. Men who believe their wives are stupid do not bother hiding well. The cake invoice reached me first through the hotel account my team was already monitoring. Custom white cake. Red lettering. Message. Lose the weight, save the marriage. I was sitting in Elise's office when I read it, and for a second, even after everything I knew, my stomach turned cold. There is something violent about seeing your private shame turned into a dessert order. Elise read the words over my shoulder and went still. "Claire," she said carefully, "we can stop this before it happens." I looked at the invoice again. Lose the weight, save the marriage. They still thought the marriage was the prize. No, I said. I want them to say it in front of witnesses. Elise did not smile, but something in her eyes changed. Concern maybe. Respect maybe. Then we prepare for a public event, not a private confrontation. After that, the party became two parties. The one Adrian thought he was throwing, and the one I was building underneath it. His version had a scale under a spotlight, stolen photos of my body, a humiliating cake, a mistress in red, and divorce papers waiting for my signature. Mine had a legal team stationed 2 floors below the ballroom, a forensic accountant with secured financial files, backup copies of every message, every receipt, every visitor log, every stolen photo, every recording, every document proving Meridian Vale's control over the most dangerous part of Whitmore Hospitality's debt. His version had champagne. Mine had evidence. For days, I moved through the mansion like nothing had changed. I let Adrian pretend he was being generous. He told me I should wear something nice for my birthday, then looked at my body and added, "Something black would be safest." I nodded as if the comment landed where he wanted it to. Evelyn sent a stylist to the house with dark, shapeless dresses chosen to make me look covered rather than dressed. "You don't want to draw the wrong kind of attention," she said, standing in my bedroom while the stylist avoided my eyes. I looked at the racks, then chose my own dress. Black, structured, elegant, with sleeves cut from one of my own More Woman prototypes. When I stepped out wearing it, Evelyn frowned. "It's a bit bold for your current figure." I looked at her in the mirror and said, "Good. I'm tired of dressing like an apology." She stared at me like she had heard a dog speak. Then she laughed once, cold and short. "Confidence is charming when it is earned." "Then I suppose tonight will be interesting," I said. She did not understand the sentence. That was fine. Most traps work best when the people inside them still believe they are the hunters. Marissa came the afternoon before the party carrying sympathy on her face and a garment bag over her arm. "I wanted to check on you," she said. "Big night tomorrow." I let her in because changing my behavior too suddenly would make her careful, and I needed her careless. She walked around my room slowly, touching the edge of my vanity, glancing at my closet, studying me the way thieves study windows. "Are you nervous?" she asked. "A little," I said. She sat beside me on the bed and squeezed my hand. Adrian's family can be intense, but maybe this is their way of helping. Helping. That was what people like them called cruelty when they wanted the victim to thank them. "Do you think I need help?" I asked. Marissa tilted her head, pretending to choose her words gently. "I think you've been unhappy for a long time. And sometimes when women are unhappy, they stop taking care of themselves." There it was. Soft voice. Knife underneath. "And Adrian?" I asked. "Has he been unhappy too?" For half a second the mask slipped. Not enough for her to confess, just enough for me to see the satisfaction beneath her pity. "He feels trapped," she said. "But he doesn't want to hurt you." My phone, hidden face down on the nightstand, recorded every word. I looked at her red nails resting on my hand and remembered those same nails near Camille's phone in the boutique. "You've always known how to say exactly what hurts," I said quietly. She smiled, thinking it was a compliment. "That's because I know you." "Yes," I said. "You do." When she left, I opened the garment bag she had placed too carefully over the chair. Inside was a red dress, the one Adrian had bought for her, altered to fit perfectly. On the hanger there was a small card in Adrian's handwriting. "Wear this after she signs." My hands did not shake when I photographed it. They did not shake when I sent it to Elise. They did not shake when I placed the dress back exactly as I had found it. That was how I knew I was no longer the woman they had been planning for. On the morning of my birthday, Adrian kissed my cheek at breakfast with his family watching and said, "Tonight is going to change everything." Evelyn smiled over her coffee. Camille looked down at her phone, probably texting someone to make sure they arrived early enough to see the good part. Richard read the financial section as if his company were not one bad headline away from panic. "I'm sure it will," I said. Adrian looked disappointed that I did not ask questions. He wanted me uncertain. He wanted me nervous. He wanted me walking into that ballroom hungry for kindness so the cruelty would land harder. I gave him what he needed to believe. I moved slowly. I let my voice stay small. I even asked if many people were coming. He smiled. Only the people who need to be there. That sentence told me everything. This was not a birthday party. This was a jury. He had invited family friends, investors, hotel executives, socialites, charity board members, people whose approval the Whitmore name depended on. If I cried, I would be unstable. If I screamed, I would be dangerous. If I ran, I would be guilty. If I signed, I would be erased. He had built a room where every reaction I gave him could be used against me. So I decided to give him something else. At 4 that afternoon, while Evelyn's stylist touched up my hair and made small disapproving sounds under her breath, Elise's team entered the Grand Aurelia through the service entrance with authorization my holding company had every legal right to grant. They tested the ballroom screen. They secured a backup connection. They set up in a private conference room with the evidence files, the debt documents, the divorce filing, the visitor logs, the screenshots, the recordings, the boutique footage, the financial transfers to Marissa, the holding company paperwork, and the emergency injunction request. Paul coordinated with lenders whose patience with the Whitmores had already been exhausted. Nina sent me one message from Moore Woman headquarters. Whatever happens tonight, remember who you built. I read it while Evelyn fastened a bracelet around my wrist too tightly and said, "Try not to embarrass Adrian tonight. He has tolerated enough." I looked at her fingers pressing into my skin and thought about how many years I had mistaken tolerance for love. At 6:30, Adrian came to the bedroom in his tuxedo. He looked handsome in the way expensive men are taught to look handsome, polished, empty, untouched by the damage they cause. His eyes moved over my dress. For a moment, irritation crossed his face. I did not look hidden enough. I did not look broken enough. "You look confident," he said. "Is that a problem?" I asked. He smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. Not for long. There it was. The warning he was too arrogant to conceal. He offered me his arm. I took it because I wanted every camera in the lobby to see him escort me into the hotel with tenderness before the world watched him turn cruel. On the ride there, he talked about forgiveness, discipline, fresh starts, and the importance of family image, the language of a man rehearsing public sainthood. I watched the city pass outside the window and thought of the rented room above the laundromat, the boutique fitting room, the storage room sewing machine, the first customer review, the first six-figure month, the first debt purchase, the file on Paul's desk heavy enough to crush a dynasty. Adrian thought he was taking me to the place where he would finally prove I had become too much. He did not know I had spent years becoming more than he could afford to lose. When the car stopped outside the Grand Aurelia, cameras flashed because Camille had made sure there would be people waiting. Adrian leaned close and whispered, "Smile, Claire. This is the last night you get to be a Whitmore." I turned toward him, gave the soft obedient smile he expected, and whispered back, "You're right." Then I stepped out of the car and walked into the hotel he still thought belonged to his family. The lobby of the Grand Aurelia smelled like lilies, champagne, and expensive lies. I had walked through that hotel many times before as Adrian's wife, but that night every chandelier seemed sharper, every marble column colder, every smile from the staff more careful than usual. People who work in luxury hotels always know when something is wrong. They know which marriages are dying before the spouses admit it. They know which families are pretending to be solvent. They know which parties are celebrations and which are executions with centerpieces. Adrian kept my hand tucked inside his arm as we crossed the lobby, performing tenderness for the photographers Camille had arranged near the entrance. "Beautiful couple," someone called. Adrian smiled like a man accepting praise he believed he deserved. I smiled too, because I had learned that a controlled smile unsettles cruel people more than tears. Inside my clutch, my hidden phone was already connected to Elise's team 2 floors below. Every word near me would be recorded. Every camera in the ballroom had been mapped. Every screen had a backup feed ready. But none of that changed the fact that my heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Power did not erase fear. It only gave fear somewhere useful to go. As we reached the ballroom doors, Adrian leaned close enough that his breath touched my ear. "Whatever happens tonight," he whispered, "try to remember I gave you more than you ever would have had without me." I looked at him and saw no rage on his face, only calm certainty. That was what made him terrifying. He truly believed he was being merciful by destroying me in public. "I remember everything," I said. He mistook that for weakness. Then the doors opened. For 1 second, the entire room blurred into gold light. Crystal chandeliers, white roses, champagne towers, polished floors, silk tablecloths, people in tuxedos and gowns turning toward us like spectators at a show they had paid to attend. Then my eyes found the center of the ballroom, and the blur sharpened into cruelty. The scale was already there. Not hidden. Not subtle. A sleek glass digital scale placed on a small raised platform under a spotlight, as if my body were the evening's main entertainment. Beside it stood Evelyn in a silver gown, smiling with the calm satisfaction of a woman who had waited years to see me finally put in my place. Richard stood near the bar with a glass in his hand. Camille held her phone at chest level, pretending to check messages, already recording. And behind the scale, filling almost the entire wall, was the screen. At first it showed a photo from my wedding day. Young Claire. Thin Claire. Poor polished, grateful Claire. The version of me the Whitmores had tolerated because she made Adrian look noble. Then the image split. Beside it appeared a photo of me in the kitchen at midnight, wearing a stretched gray shirt, one hand inside the pantry, my face turned away in exhaustion. Another appeared. Me asleep on the couch. Another. Me crying in front of the closet. Another. Me standing in front of a mirror, holding fabric against my stomach, unaware that someone had taken the picture from the doorway. Picture stolen from private pain, collected without love, arranged to make a room judge me before I could speak. My skin went cold, but I did not look down. That was the first battle of the night, refusing to act ashamed before they even finished building the shame. Evelyn walked toward me with her arms open, as if greeting a beloved daughter-in-law. Guests smiled nervously. Cameras followed her. When she reached me, she kissed the air beside my cheek and pressed her fingers into my wrist hard enough to hurt. "Smile," she whispered. "You look worse when you pout." Then louder she said, "Our Claire is finally here." The room clapped, but it was not warm applause. It was the kind of applause people give when they know something ugly is coming and do not want to admit they are excited. Adrian guided me forward, but halfway to the platform, Evelyn took over. Her hand closed around my wrist, and for a moment I was back in every dinner, every boutique, every hallway where she had pulled, corrected, adjusted, and judged me like an object that kept refusing to fit the family display. "Come now," she said brightly. "Everyone has been waiting." I let her drag me because resisting too soon would give them the collapse they wanted. The scale waited under the light. On the cake table nearby, the white frosting gleamed beneath red letters. "Lose the weight, save the marriage." Seeing it in person was worse than seeing the invoice. The words were not just cruel. They were childish, theatrical, vulgar in a way rich people pretended they were above. That made it more dangerous. They had become so confident in my helplessness that they no longer felt the need to hide hatred behind manners. Adrian took the microphone from a waiter and tapped it twice. The sound cracked through the ballroom. "Thank you all for coming," he said, his voice rich and practiced. "Tonight is difficult but necessary. Some families hide their problems. The Whitmores confront them." Evelyn nodded as if approving a verdict. Adrian continued. "For 7 years I have tried to be patient. I married Claire when she had nothing. No money. No name. No place in our world. I gave her a home, a family, a life most people would dream of." He turned toward me, letting the room follow his gaze to my body. "But gratitude requires discipline. And unfortunately, my wife has mistaken comfort for permission to stop trying." A murmur moved through the guests. Some looked embarrassed. Some looked fascinated. Some looked at me with the same expression I had seen in the boutique. Pity sharpened into judgment. I searched the room and found hotel executives, investors, charity board members, old family friends, people whose approval the Whitmores valued more than decency. Adrian had chosen them carefully. This was not humiliation for humiliation's sake. This was reputation management. If he made me look disgusting enough, unstable enough, undisciplined enough, then his affair would become rescue, his divorce would become necessity, and my disappearance would become the family's recovery. Evelyn lifted a wrapped box from a table and placed it in my hands. "Open it, dear," she said. The paper was thick, cream-colored, tied with satin ribbon. Inside was another scale, smaller than the one on the platform, with a card tucked against the glass. Evelyn took the card before I could touch it and read aloud. For the woman who must finally face herself. Camille laughed first. Then two women near the champagne tower laughed because Camille had given them permission. Adrian smiled. My hands tightened around the box, and Evelyn leaned close enough that only I could hear her next sentence. Break now if you want. It will make the rest easier. I looked at her and said nothing. That irritated her. She wanted tears. She wanted trembling. She wanted the poor girl back, the one who laughed when insulted because she did not know how else to survive. When I gave her silence instead, she turned to Adrian with a small frown. He adjusted quickly. Before we move forward, he said, I think honesty is important. The screen changed again. This time it showed me years ago in a fitted blue dress, standing beside Adrian at our engagement party. Then beside it appeared the private photo Marissa had taken of me feverish on the couch. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Adrian let the comparison sit long enough to bruise. "This," he said, pointing toward the first photo, "is the woman I married." Then he turned toward the second. "And this is what I come home to now." The room did not erupt into laughter this time. It was worse. It tightened. People shifted, looked at each other, decided how much cruelty was socially safe to enjoy. Richard finally stepped forward, his patience gone. For one brief second I thought maybe he had found a limit. Then he pulled a black leather folder from beneath his arm and threw it at my feet. The folder hit the polished floor and opened. Divorce papers slid across the marble like something dead. "Sign," Richard said. "Do not embarrass this family further." Adrian lowered the microphone and looked at me with false sadness. "Claire, I wanted to do this privately. But private conversations have not worked. Tonight, you have people around you who care enough to tell you the truth." That was when the side doors opened and Marissa walked in. The red dress fit her perfectly. Adrian's dress. My bedroom's warning flag. She moved through the room like she had rehearsed every step, head slightly lowered, face arranged into sorrow, one hand pressed to her chest as if she were the one being wounded. The guests turned toward her. Evelyn's expression softened in a way it never had for me. Camille lowered her phone for just a second, smiling with open satisfaction. Marissa reached Adrian and slipped her hand around his arm. He did not pull away. He covered her hand with his. A performance of tenderness placed exactly where the cameras could see. She looked at me, and for the first time that night, she did not bother pretending there was love left between us. "We tried to help you," she said softly, but her voice carried because the room had gone silent. "I tried to help you. I told you to love your body because I knew no one else would." Something moved through the crowd, a gasp, maybe, or the sound people make when cruelty becomes too naked to be mistaken for concern. Marissa continued, encouraged by my stillness. "Adrian deserves someone who can stand beside him without making him ashamed. This family deserves a woman who understands what it means to represent something bigger than herself." She looked down at the divorce papers, then back at me. "Please, Claire. Let him go with dignity." Dignity. I almost smiled at that. They had dragged me toward a scale, displayed stolen photos of my body, mocked my poverty, turned my birthday cake into an insult, paraded my best friend as my replacement, and now they wanted to speak to me about dignity. Evelyn grabbed my wrist again, harder this time. "Step on the scale," she said. "Then sign. Let everyone see that for once in your life, you can be honest." I pulled my hand back. Not violently, just enough to reclaim it. Her eyes flashed. The slap came fast. Sharp. Public. Her palm struck my face so hard my head turned and the ballroom went silent all at once. A tiny metallic taste filled my mouth. Somewhere near the front, a woman whispered Evelyn's name in shock. Camille stopped filming for half a second, then started again. Adrian did not move toward me. Marissa did not flinch. Richard looked annoyed, not at the slap, but at the interruption to the plan. Evelyn leaned close, her lips barely moving. "Don't act proud now," she hissed. "You were a poor girl when we picked you up. Now you're just a fat mistake my son has to erase." My cheek burned. My eyes watered from the impact, and I let the tears rise just enough for the cameras to catch them. Not because I was breaking, because evidence looks stronger when it shows the wound. Adrian lifted the microphone again, trying to recover the room. "As you can see," he said, voice strained, "this is emotional, but necessary. He bent, picked up the divorce papers and pushed them into my hands. "Sign them," he said quietly, forgetting for one fatal second that quiet voices near my body were still being recorded. "Sign them, or I will make sure everyone knows exactly how unstable you are." Marissa stepped closer, her perfume sweet and expensive. "You should be grateful," she whispered. "Most women like you do not even get this much warning before they are replaced." That was the final thing I needed. Not legally, not emotionally, strategically. They had struck me, threatened me, exposed the affair publicly, used stolen images, admitted coercion near a live recorder, and done all of it in front of the people whose money kept their empire breathing. The room waited for me to collapse. Evelyn waited for me to obey. Adrian waited for me to sign. Marissa waited for me to disappear. I looked down at the papers in my hands, then at the scale, then at the cake, then at the screen filled with stolen versions of my body. For 7 years, they had made my life smaller, one insult at a time. For 3 years, I had built something larger in the dark. And at last, both worlds had arrived in the same room. I let the papers fall from my hands. They scattered across the platform, white against marble. Then I bent down slowly. Adrian exhaled as if he thought I was surrendering. Evelyn's mouth curved. Marissa tilted her head with pity prepared. But I did not pick up the papers. I picked up the microphone Adrian had set on the edge of the platform when he pushed the folder at me. My fingers closed around it. The ballroom speakers gave a low hum. Every camera turned toward me. I touched the corner of my mouth, saw red on my fingertip, and looked directly at the guests who had come to watch a poor fat wife be erased. "You called this a trial," I said, my voice shaking only enough to sound human. "Good." I lifted my eyes to Adrian, then to Evelyn, then to Marissa in her red dress. "Then let's present the evidence." For 1 second after I said the word evidence, no one moved. Not Adrian. Not Evelyn. Not Marissa in her red dress. Not Richard with his champagne glass frozen halfway to his mouth. The entire ballroom seemed to hold its breath, as if the polished guests had suddenly realized they were no longer watching a woman collapse for entertainment. They were standing inside something that might stain them too. Adrian recovered first. He laughed sharp and too loud, the way guilty men laugh when they need the room to believe they are still in control. "Claire," he said, reaching for the microphone, "you're emotional. Put that down." I stepped back before his fingers touched it. The small movement made his face tighten. He was not used to me moving away from him with purpose. Evelyn reached for my arm again, but this time I looked directly at her and said, "Touch me again and every camera in this room will have a better angle for court." Her hand stopped in the air. That was the first crack. The woman who had slapped me in front of 200 people suddenly remembered witnesses existed. Adrian lowered his voice, trying to sound gentle, husbandly, concerned. "You're embarrassing yourself." I looked at the cake, at the scale, at the stolen photographs of my body still glowing behind him. "No," I said. "I'm finally letting you finish what you started." Then I turned toward the screen. 2 floors below us, Elise's team was waiting for exactly that cue. The photos of me vanished. For half a second, the wall went black. Then the first message appeared in white text against the dark screen. Adrian to Marissa. "Use the worst pictures. I need everyone disgusted before she signs." The room reacted like someone had opened a window in winter. A rush of whispers, a few gasps, the scrape of a chair. Adrian's face went blank. Marissa's hand slipped from his arm. Before either of them could speak, the next message appeared. Marissa to Adrian. "I have photos from when she was sick on the couch. She'll hate those most." Then another. Adrian. "Good. If she breaks down publicly, no one questions the divorce." Another. Marissa. "Make it look like an intervention. Rich people love cruelty if you dress it up as concern." Someone near the front whispered, "Jesus." Camille lowered her phone slowly, finally understanding that she had not been filming my breakdown. She had been filming the beginning of theirs. Adrian lunged toward the side table where the event controller sat and snapped at a hotel technician standing near the wall. "Turn it off." The man looked terrified, but he did not move. Not because he was brave. Because the hotel system was no longer answering to Adrian. I raised the microphone again. That screen is being controlled from a private conference room downstairs by my attorney. If you touch the equipment, it will be added to the obstruction file. Richard slammed his glass down so hard champagne spilled over his hand. This is absurd. I looked at him. I agree. A family putting a scale in the middle of a ballroom to force a woman into signing divorce papers is absurd. But since you all wanted witnesses, let's not waste them. The screen changed again. This time it showed a video clip from the hallway outside Adrian's study, captured by the home security system they had always used to monitor everyone, but never expected me to understand. The audio filled the ballroom with Adrian's voice. If I leave her now, people will say I abandoned a poor fat wife. I need her to embarrass herself first. Then Marissa's voice followed, smooth and unmistakable. Then make her break down in public. The crowd shifted again. The people who had laughed earlier now looked anywhere but at me. That was the second crack. Shame moving from my body to the people who had enjoyed watching it be judged. Marissa stepped forward, her face pale under the makeup. Claire, that's out of context. I almost laughed. Which part? The part where you planned my humiliation? Or the part where you slept with my husband while pretending to help me survive him? The next slide answered before she could. A hotel receipt. A jewelry invoice. A lease agreement for a private apartment. A boutique purchase for the red dress she was wearing that night. All charged through accounts tied to Whitmore Hospitality. Marissa looked down at her own dress like the fabric had suddenly turned to fire. The screen zoomed in on the note from Adrian. Wear this after she signs. A low murmur rolled through the ballroom, uglier now, no longer aimed at me. Marissa tried to step away from Adrian, but there was nowhere clean left for her to stand. Evelyn's voice cut across the room. This is a family matter. I turned toward her slowly. My cheek still burned from her slap, but now the pain felt useful. You made it a public matter when you put my body on that screen. Another video appeared. Boutique security footage. Evelyn pulling open the fitting room curtain while I stood trapped in the gold dress. Camille lifting her phone. Marissa pretending concern while looking toward the camera. Evelyn's voice, clear enough for every guest to hear. Adrian cannot bring this to a gala. Then another clip appeared from minutes earlier in that same ballroom. Evelyn's hand striking my face. The sound echoed through the speakers louder than I remembered it, sharp enough to make several people flinch. Evelyn finally looked afraid. Not sorry. Afraid. There is a difference. I said. For years this family told me I should be grateful. Grateful for the house. Grateful for the name. Grateful that Adrian rescued me from poverty. But gratitude is not consent. Marriage is not ownership. And money does not turn cruelty into discipline. Adrian's expression changed. The charm dissolved, leaving something harder underneath. You think you're powerful because you hired a lawyer? He said. You have no idea what my family can do. That was the sentence I had been waiting for. I looked toward the back of the ballroom. The double doors opened, and Elise walked in with Paul beside her and two members of her legal team behind them. They did not rush. They did not shout. They crossed the ballroom with the calm of people who had already won the part that mattered. Elise stopped near the platform and handed me a thick blue file with my name printed neatly across the tab. Mrs. Whitmore, she said, loud enough for the front rows to hear. Your filing was accepted at 8:03 p.m. Adrian blinked. Filing. Elise turned to him. Divorce petition. Emergency preservation order. Asset disclosure demand. Evidence preservation notice. And a formal complaint regarding coercion, misuse of private images, non-consensual distribution of personal material, and suspected financial misconduct through Whitmore Hospitality accounts. Richard stepped forward. You have no authority here. Paul opened his laptop, connected it to the second screen and said, Actually, the authority question is about to become very interesting. The screen shifted again. This time the messages disappeared, replaced by documents most of the guests probably did not understand at first. Debt schedules, loan covenants, property liens, restructuring notes, lender notices. Richard understood immediately. The color drained from his face. Adrian looked from the screen to his father. Dad. Richard did not answer. He was staring at one line highlighted in yellow. Controlling interest in distressed debt acquired by Meridian Vale Holdings. Adrian's eyes narrowed. What is Meridian Vale? I felt the first real smile of the night touch my mouth. Mine. Silence dropped so fast it felt physical. Not polite silence. Not shocked silence. Ruined silence. Richard recovered enough to sneer. You expect us to believe you own an investment company? I looked at the room, at the guests who had once treated me like a poor woman lucky to stand near expensive things. No. I expect your lenders to believe the paperwork they already signed. Paul clicked again. The next slide showed the acquisition documents, the purchase of the hotel note, the restaurant loan package, and the redevelopment debt tied to the project Richard had been bragging about for years. Over the last 18 months, Paul said, Meridian Vale legally acquired several critical portions of Whitmore Hospitality's distressed debt. Given the evidence of internal misuse of corporate funds displayed tonight, we will be requesting immediate review of loan compliance. If the covenants were breached, control remedies may be triggered. He spoke in calm financial language, but even the guests who did not understand the details understood the effect. The empire was not being insulted. It was being opened on the table. Richard turned on Adrian with a look I had never seen before. Not anger at the affair, not anger at the cruelty, but anger at being exposed. What did you do? He hissed. Adrian's mouth opened, then closed. He looked at me as if seeing me for the first time and hating the view. This is impossible, he said. You don't have that kind of money. I lifted my eyes to the screen one last time. The document shifted. The More Woman logo appeared. A deep black background. White lettering. Clean. Elegant. Unapologetic. Under it came the revenue figures, the retail partnerships, the valuation, the investment structure, and the ownership documents showing Meridian Vale Holdings as the parent entity and me as the controlling founder. A ripple moved through the room. Someone whispered, More Woman. Another person said, That brand is hers? I watched recognition spread among the women first. A few of them knew the name. One woman near the back actually touched the sleeve of her dress, and I realized with a strange pulse of satisfaction that she was wearing one of mine. Evelyn stared at the logo like it had slapped her back. Camille looked sick. Marissa's face did something fragile and ugly as she understood that the very body she had mocked had built the brand now worth more than the social position she had sold her soul to enter. Adrian shook his head slowly. You built a clothing company? No, I said. I built a company for every woman you thought was too much to love, too big to respect, too ashamed to fight back. I looked at the scale. And then I used it to buy the debt holding your family together. The room erupted then. Not in applause. In noise. Investors speaking into phones. Hotel executives moving toward the exits. Guests whispering names and numbers. Richard barking at Paul. Evelyn demanding security, only to have security look toward the hotel manager, who looked toward Elise. Adrian grabbed my arm hard enough that several people saw it. You manipulative bitch, he whispered. This time I did not pull away. I let the cameras catch his hand on me. Then I said clearly into the microphone, Remove your hand from me. He froze, realizing too late that the room had heard. Elise stepped forward. Mr. Whitmore, I would strongly advise you to let go. He did, but the damage was done. Marissa, desperate now, turned toward the guests. She planned this. She set us up. She's not a victim. I looked at her in the red dress paid for with money taken from a company already bleeding. You are right about one thing, I said. I planned this. I planned it after you took pictures of me when I was sick. After you repeated my private fears to my husband. After you helped him build a party around a scale and divorce papers. After you decided my pain was the ladder you would climb into this family. Marissa's eyes filled with tears, but they did not move me. I had seen her real face too many times. Claire, she whispered. We were like sisters. No, I said. Sisters don't bring red dresses to funerals they helped arrange. Evelyn tried one last time. You were nothing when you came to us. I turned to her, and this time the room turned with me. Yes, I said. I came from nothing. That is why I knew how to build from nothing. You came from everything and still managed to lose it. Her mouth opened but no sound came out. That was the moment I knew they were finished. Not legally. That would take months. Not financially. That would take filings, audits, lender meetings, and court hearings. But publicly, socially, symbolically, the Whitmores had fallen in the exact room where they tried to make me kneel. I looked down at the divorce papers scattered on the floor, then at Adrian. "You wanted me to sign these tonight," I said. "I won't." His face flickered with relief for one stupid second, as if he thought I still wanted the marriage. I let him have that second because taking it away felt better. Then I opened the blue folder Elise had handed me. I filed my own. I held up the first page. And unlike yours, mine comes with evidence. The ballroom was silent again, but this silence belonged to me. I placed the microphone back on the stand beside the scale and stepped down from the platform. No one blocked me. No one touched me. No one laughed. As I passed the cake table, I picked up the knife meant for cutting the birthday cake, sliced cleanly through the red words "lose the weight," "save the marriage," and set the knife down beside the ruined frosting. Then I turned back to Adrian one final time. "You were right about tonight changing everything," I said. "Just not for me." And behind me, on the screen where my stolen photos had been displayed minutes earlier, the More Woman logo remained glowing over the room like a verdict. I left the Grand Aurelia ballroom without running, without hiding my face, and without looking back until I reached the lobby doors. Behind me, the room I had entered as a target had become a storm of ringing phones, whispered panic, and rich people suddenly remembering they had urgent places to be. Adrian tried to follow me, but Elise stepped between us before he could cross the threshold. "Any further contact goes through counsel," she said, calm enough to make him look even more desperate. He stared past her at me with the kind of rage that only comes from a man who has lost control in public. "Claire," he said, as if my name still belonged to him. I turned just enough to see him standing there in his tuxedo, the More Woman logo glowing behind him, the ruined cake beside him, the red words cut cleanly through the frosting. For 7 years, I had waited for that man to choose me, defend me, love me loudly enough to silence his family. Now, for the first time, I felt nothing when he looked at me. Not longing, not grief, not even hatred. Hatred would have given him too much space inside me. I simply saw him clearly. A rich man raised inside an empire he had mistaken for character. A husband who thought humiliation was easier than accountability. A son who believed a family name could protect him from consequences. "You wanted me gone," I said. "Now speak to my lawyer." Then I walked out of the hotel he still thought of as his family's crown jewel, while the staff opened the doors for me like they had been waiting years to see someone leave that building with her head up. By the next morning, the story was everywhere. Not the version Adrian had planned. Not the poor unstable wife crying over divorce papers. Not the tragic tale of a generous family forced to let go of a woman who had become impossible to help. The videos told the truth before the Whitmores could buy a cleaner one. Camille's own footage showed Evelyn dragging me toward the scale. A guest's video caught the slap. Someone near the cake table had recorded Marissa walking in wearing the red dress, taking Adrian's arm, and telling me she had only encouraged me to love my body because she knew no one else would. The clip of me saying, "Then let's present the evidence," spread faster than any statement the Whitmores could draft. By noon, people were calling it the birthday trial. By evening, reporters had connected the ballroom scandal to More Woman, to Meridian Veil Holdings, and to the debt quietly wrapped around Whitmore Hospitality's throat. Evelyn released a statement first, calling the evening a deeply personal family intervention taken out of context. That lasted 4 hours before Elise released selected portions of the legal complaint. Adrian released his own statement next, saying he had always loved me and had only wanted to encourage me toward a healthier life. More Woman's customers destroyed that statement before my team had to. Thousands of women posted pictures in our clothes with the caption, "My body is not your intervention." Public shame was only the beginning. The real collapse happened in conference rooms, board calls, and bank offices where old money sounded less powerful once lenders began asking for documents. Paul triggered the compliance review tied to the debt Meridian Veil controlled. Once that happened, every weak beam inside Whitmore Hospitality began to crack. The hotel division had been covering losses by moving money between accounts. The restaurant group had inflated projections to keep credit lines open. Adrian had signed off on expenses for Marissa's apartment, travel, wardrobe, and consulting fees under vague categories like brand relations. Camille had used family company funds for personal media campaigns. Richard had pledged future revenue from his redevelopment project twice, once to a bank and once to a private lender who had not been told the full story. It was not one scandal. It was a chandelier with every wire cut at once. Richard called me on the fourth day from an unknown number. I answered only because Elise was beside me and recording. His voice was lower than usual, stripped of the bored superiority he had always worn like a suit. "This has gone far enough," he said. I looked out the window at the city below, the same city I used to cross by bus with sore feet and coins in my pocket. "No," I said. "It has finally reached you." He tried anger first, then dignity, then family, then the word he thought would still work on me, gratitude. "We gave you a life," he said. "You gave me a lesson," I answered. "I learned that people who call themselves untouchable usually leave fingerprints everywhere." He hung up before I finished speaking. Evelyn sent a handwritten letter on thick cream paper, accusing me of destroying the family over hurt feelings. She wrote that I had misunderstood discipline, that Adrian had been under pressure, that Marissa had been misguided, and that no decent woman would expose private family pain for public sympathy. I read the letter once, then handed it to Elise. Marissa tried a different strategy. She cried online. She posted a video with no makeup, saying she had been manipulated by Adrian, that she loved me like a sister, that she had never meant for the party to become cruel. But the internet had already seen the messages. They had seen the photo she took of me while I was sick. They had seen the card in Adrian's handwriting telling her to wear the red dress after I signed. They had heard her voice telling him to make me break down publicly. Women who had once followed her for soft little body-positive quotes filled her comments with the same sentence. "You sold another woman's shame for a seat at the table." Her sponsors dropped her one by one. The studio she had opened with money I once helped her access closed within weeks. When her lawyer asked whether I would consider a private settlement, Elise sent one line back for me. "Mrs. Whitmore is no longer available for private humiliation or private silence." Adrian lost the thing he had mistaken for identity, not the marriage. He had already thrown that away. He lost the illusion that he was the powerful one. The board of Whitmore Hospitality forced him into administrative leave after the expense records became public. Investors pulled out of the redevelopment project. 2 lenders accelerated review. Meridian Vale exercised its rights under the debt agreements, not recklessly, not emotionally, but with the cold patience I had paid very expensive people to maintain. The Grand Aurelia did not close overnight. That would have been wasteful. It was placed under restructuring. Management changed. Richard was removed from operational control. Evelyn stopped hosting luncheons there because no one wanted to be photographed beneath chandeliers now associated with the night she slapped her daughter-in-law beside a scale. Camille deleted her social accounts for mental health, though everyone knew she simply could not stand being mocked by the same people she had once entertained by mocking me. The mansion was sold within the year as part of the restructuring package. I did not buy it. People expected me to. Maybe because revenge stories always want the woman to sit on the villain's old throne. But I had no desire to live inside a house where every hallway remembered me crying. Let strangers take it. Let them repaint the walls, replace the curtains, and erase the smell of old money and cruelty. I had built something better than that house. I had built doors I could open without asking permission. The divorce was uglier than the party, but quieter. Adrian fought at first, then folded when discovery threatened to expose more than he could survive. His lawyers tried to argue that more women had grown during the marriage, and that he deserved a share. Elise expected that. So did I. But Adrian's mistake was greed. To claim part of my company, he had to admit he knew enough about my work to support it. He did not. He had mocked it in messages, ignored its existence in financial disclosures, and repeatedly referred to me as unemployed in documents his own legal team had prepared. My attorneys used his contempt as a wall. He had spent years insisting I was nothing. In court, that lie became useful. We settled with strict terms. He received less than he wanted, more than he deserved, and far less than the price of the empire his family lost by underestimating me. The day the divorce was finalized, I did not wear black. I wore deep green, a more woman's suit cut to my exact body, structured at the shoulders, soft at the waist, powerful without trying to make me smaller. When I stepped out of the courthouse, reporters shouted questions about Adrian, Marissa, the Whitmores, and whether I felt vindicated. I had prepared a statement because Vivian insisted preparation keeps power from becoming spectacle. But when the microphones rose toward my face, I folded the paper in my hand and spoke from the place they had tried hardest to kill. I was poor when he met me. I was heavier when he hated me. I was humiliated when he thought I was helpless. None of those things made me worthless. They only made him careless. That line ran on every morning show the next day, but the letters mattered more than the headlines. Women wrote to say they left husbands who weighed their bodies like debts. Women wrote to say they wore fitted dresses to court. Women wrote to say they stopped apologizing before giving their measurements. More women grew beyond clothing after that. We launched grants for women rebuilding after financial abuse. We funded legal clinics. We created fitting programs in cities where plus-size women had never been treated like luxury customers. Months later, I returned to the Grand Aurelia for the first More Woman Foundation Gala. Not as Adrian's wife. Not as Evelyn's charity project. Not as the poor girl they had rescued, polished, pitted, fattened into their favorite insult, and tried to erase. I returned as the woman whose company was hosting the event in the ballroom, where they had put a scale under a spotlight. We removed the old stage. We filled the room with warm mirrors, racks of gowns in every size, and women taking up space like it had always belonged to them. Near the entrance where the scale had once stood, I placed a single framed sentence: "You do not have to become smaller to be treated with dignity." At one point I stood alone near the cake table and remembered the red letters. "Lose the weight, save the marriage." I thought about the woman I had been that night, cheek burning, mouth bleeding, divorce papers at her feet, every camera waiting for her to break. I wished I could reach back and tell her that she was not standing at the end of her life. She was standing at the beginning of the part where she stopped begging cruel people to see her humanity and started building a world that did. Adrian never came back from what happened. Marissa never wore red in public again. Evelyn still told people I had always been ambitious in an unpleasant way, which made me smile because she was finally right about something. The last time I passed the Grand Aurelia ballroom after an event, the lights were dim, the floor polished, and the room quiet. For a moment, I could almost see the old version of myself standing under the spotlight beside that scale. I did not look away from her. I did not pity her. I thanked her. She had survived the slap, the laughter, the betrayal, and the years of being told she was lucky to be tolerated. She had carried the shame long enough for me to turn it into evidence, then capital, then power, then freedom. He married me when I was poor and called it charity. He humiliated me when I got fat and called it honesty. But when I became richer than his entire family and bought the empire he used to shame me, I called it justice. And the best part was not that I destroyed him. The best part was that after everything he did to make me feel small, I never had to become small to win.